Part-Time Hitter is brought to you by Friendly Forces, a 501c3 nonprofit committed to helping reserve component members seamlessly integrate their military service with rewarding civilian careers. We connect them with employers who value their unique skills and critical role in national security and advise organizations how to become more reservist-friendly. Check them out at www.friendlyforces.org. Friendly Forces is also brought to you by the Fratty Guard, a lifestyle brand for part-time hitters. Check them out at www.thefrattyguard.com and on Instagram at @thefrattyguard. Welcome, everybody. Another episode of Part-Time Hitter. I'm Eric Evans. I'm here with Ryan McBeth. Ryan's a busy guy. Had a 20-year career spanning active duty Army National Guard. Is now doing some really interesting stuff with OSINT collection and some really cool stuff with drones and donor blood and all sorts of stuff. We'll get into that because it's really cool. Super relevant right now. So Ryan, thank you for having us. Glad to have you here, man.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate the invite.
And so you had actually, I had seen your stuff before across like multiple channels before I even sort of connected like you on LinkedIn to like this other person. I had seen your stuff on like Instagram, on Reddit. I don't even know if it was you sharing it or other people sharing your stuff, but it seems like you've become sort of kind of an expert in what would you call it? I would call it kind of the information domain.
Yeah, infodom war. I guess I have become I put quotes around the expert in infodom war, but it's kind of like that movie, The Martian, right? I am the best biologist on this planet. Right.
Okay.
But if you're the only guy doing it, then I guess you probably become the best, right? Like, really, people. And I only started doing the infodom war stuff because I was doing the intel stuff, and I was working for a private company. It was two different private companies doing intel stuff and C4ISR software and how the intel relates to that. But I started doing the information warfare stuff because like I noticed all these lies. And it's kind of like how Forrest Gump became an amazing runner because people were always chasing him. Mm-hmm. And I was like, this is like, this person is lying. They don't know anything about this thing. So I started correcting these things. And the more I did it, the more I realized like, oh my God, there's a whole underlying subculture of people who are just trying to get other people to believe something online that isn't true. And I got hooked up with Velocity. I got hooked up with Cyabra, and I started doing it. Essentially, like my channel flipped from, hey, this is why tank turrets pop off their hulls to, hey, this is why people are lying to you about why tank turrets pop off their hulls. I still do the equipment side of things. But like it's the infodom war that's just fascinating because it is a weapon system. One example I like to give is the MV Cape Orlando. So you had this ship that was in port in the port of Los Angeles, and this Iranian-backed American group, like the Coalition for Arabs who do whatever, I forget their actual name. This group put out a notice on Instagram and TikTok that said like, hey, if you want to support Gaza, come to the port of Long Beach and glue yourself to the side of the MV Cape Orlando because it's leaving with weapons for Israel. And none of these blue-haired idiots looked at a map because if you were going to Israel with weapons, you'd probably leave from the Atlantic, not the Pacific.
Okay, necessarily, but yes.
Yeah. I guess you could go through the darn Panama Canal, but the water levels have been really low past years. There's a drought. So what Iran just did was they used a weapon system. If you want to destroy if you want to prevent a ship, a Navy ship from leaving port, you could use a missile, right? You could use like a limpet mine, get a special forces team in there, put the limpet mine on it, blow it up. Or you could convince a bunch of blue-haired idiots to glue themselves to the side of the ship. The effector is the same. You start thinking of weapons in terms of effects and effectors. You want the ship to leave, not to leave, right? So what kind of effector can we use to prevent that? let's use the blue-haired idiots. It's a weapon. And that's why I go around and give speeches saying we need to kill these people. Not the people gluing themselves to the side of the ship, but the Iranians who are convincing these people to do it.
It's really interesting because, if you can win in the cognitive environment, information domain, you don't need to have a lot more. You're winning here at home just by diluting, the messaging people are getting. Oh, we shouldn't be there, blah, 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 blah. And then you've won with that deep fire shot.
If Russia wants to stop Germany from sending munitions like artillery shells to Ukraine, they could bomb the artillery plant. Okay, Article 5. They could do sabotage of the artillery plant. They could get caught. Or they could convince the German people not to send weapons to Ukraine. The effect is the same.
I know that certain actors seem to be, employing this effectively, using it to their advantage. Like, does the United States, I feel like we don't do that. We're not really in that fight. And it's like they're on the battlefield and we haven't even showed up yet. Is that...
We don't... I'm sorry, please.
Well, I mean, you think that's true?
Yeah, and so there is some propaganda to stuff like Voice of America, which isn't necessarily propaganda as much as it is telling the truth. It's this amazing strategy of we're actually going to tell the truth about what's going on. But the United States, it's almost like, I'm going to give one example. It's almost like hypersonic missiles. The Infodom War is almost like the whole hypersonic missile thing. Hypersonic missiles aren't very good. We're talking about these glide, these working body hypersonic missiles. You're going to spend $30 million for a missile that's going to make a hole, right? And it's understandable you might want to make a hole at a rapid rate of speed. That makes a lot of sense. Let's make this hole. But really, a hypersonic glide vehicle would be very good for taking out something like an aircraft carrier. Well, the U.S. is basically the only nation that has a bunch of aircraft carriers. We have 11. Most countries have 0, right? Like France ain't going to have 2. Italy has 1. Britain has 2, I believe. I think Brazil has 1. But not a lot of countries have aircraft carriers. So we don't necessarily need the hypersonic weapon because what are we going to fire it against? We're going to hit a camel in the butt with a freaking $30 million missile, right? So when it comes to information warfare, we don't necessarily need to put out disinformation because we're so good at bombing people in real life that we have those capabilities. We have those forward deployed bases. So instead of shouting down people's opinions, we can just kill them. And that is an option that we have in our toolkit. In fact, whether it's the best option that's left up for debate, we're really good at bombing people. And so we should probably stick with our core competence.
I mean, that's the thing. We look at our tech social media platforms. They have down to a science how to get you to buy a certain T-shirt or to do a certain thing or to vote for a certain candidate. And why? And I assume, to an extent, more adversaries are using some of this against our population. Why can't we kind of dial that in, more pointedly to...
I don't know. It could just be a freedom of speech thing. Like, the idea of spreading disinformation, which I don't believe we've done since I want to say the 80s. We're like, and I've read about stuff like this where like the CIA created a jazz magazine in East Germany that had subversive literature. And you're like, all right. I mean, so we spent X amount of dollars to create. It's almost like someone in the CIA really liked jazz, right? And back then the CIA wasn't really. They didn't have a lot of oversight, right? You're not getting away with that now,
right?
You're not. But so there needs to be some sort of quantitative benefit from establishing any kind of program, and I think that since we're so focused on short-term results and our adversaries are thinking over a far bigger picture, we might need to really think about how we view goals, right? Because an adversary like China, they've been around 5,000 years, right?
Wow.
Like their timeline, their history goes back 5,000. We don't have a history, right? So if China doesn't take Taiwan in 2027, all right, they can wait until 2127, right? Like that time is on their side. So I think one of the reasons we don't do it is that it's really hard to give a qualitative goal. Whereas if you drop a bomb on somebody, quantitative goal. Whereas if you drop a bomb on somebody, all right, well, I dropped the bomb, check. Guys paced, check. And it's a very easy metric to
more sort of insinuous use of it is foreign adversaries propping up certain political candidates within our system who then we're looking at this, we're seeing, the meme culture, that type of stuff, which really affects people's opinions. In fact, I have a theory that memes are actually what shapes and forms most people's opinions, at least if you're like under maybe 30 these days. And usually the first people to get that messaging out, like in a meme sort of in a package, is what becomes like the default opinion, especially if it's a good and funny meme. Like then it's up to you to like sort of counteract that. So I don't know. It's like I feel like our government has to be better at countering mis and disinformation than they are. And I don't know.
So that's the scary part. And this is coming from a guy who is looking you in the eye and saying that we need to kill these people. And I'll press the button myself, and then I'll go home. I'll order a pizza, crack open a beer, and watch the Washington Wizards.
This being the blue-hairs.
Man, maybe I'm a psychopath, right? But like, look, I wrote software to kill people. I still write that software. It's not that big of a deal. It's amazing what you can live with. And I can tell you that one of the issues that I kind of have is that I don't like the idea of the government determining what is true for Americans. Now, if you're a foreigner and a foreigner is saying there's Americans in Ukraine that are shooting missiles at Russia, well, that's a lie. And we know that's a lie. And we know that's a lie because we're the government, and we know that there's no Americans in Ukraine shooting missiles at Russia. Then it's okay to kill those people. But if an American is saying, like, well, I don't want to get the COVID shot because I don't think it's been tested, I don't necessarily think the American government needs to be in the business of determining what is true and what is not true when it comes to the average American. That's a slippery slope to go down. So, as much as I would love someone to be able to say, well, this is misinformation, this is disinformation, this is why, maybe that role shouldn't be the government. That role needs to be the average educated person.
Well,
who can say, with a platform, who can say, you're lying and here's why.
And that's part of the problem. Like a lot of Americans, I didn't say most Americans are not super intelligent, honestly. Like your average American is not that smart, in my opinion.
I think we're more intelligent than you think. I think that we certainly we tend to make the right decisions. And there were people who were flipping out that President Trump was elected. Ryan, what do you think it's going to do for the military? What do you think? I was like, well, probably going to get a 500 ship Navy. Not like there's good and bad here. Right? All right, maybe we shouldn't throw 20,000 trans people out of the military, but we will have Navy ships that might be able to compete with China, so that's a plus, right? I don't think we're going to get rid of transgender people in the military, but I can see people flipping out, and then like you kind of realize, the president really can't do much, right? When you think about it, they can do some things, but their hands are tied on a lot of things. There's a lot of inertia, and so like I kind of look at that. I look at the incoming administration. They're going to do some good things, and they're going to do some boneheaded things. And you know what? President Biden did some good things, and he did quite a few boneheaded things too. When you look at our withdrawal from Afghanistan and how like there's this trickle of weapons going into Ukraine, that's actually going to be interesting. If President Trump gets in. And we go, like President Biden was horrible for slow walking these weapons. And we go, oh, crap, we have a lot fewer weapons than we thought. That's going to be kind of scary.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting couple of months here. And I think you're right. I think there's a lot of talk. There's some big plans, but like the Doge and whoever will get in there and realize it's not quite as easy to break this lumbering machine as you seem to like think it's going to be. But that said, I think they'll be able to do some things, and some of it might be good, and some of it maybe won't be. But I'm cautiously optimistic, I would say. I think it'll be interesting.
Yeah, there are certainly efficiencies to be found. I mean, I work for a defense company. It's one of my jobs.
Man, how do you have time for anything?
I have no life. I'm serious. Like literally, I do YouTube. I work for Velocity, which is a private intelligence company. I work for Newsmax as an intelligence analyst. I work for Aeromed Lab almost full time, probably about 35 hours a week right now. Last week, I was there all week at our new test facility in Texas. It's a company that delivers whole blood, the AI powered drones. Delivers them to soldiers on the battlefield. And I'm also a novelist. So like 5 freaking time. I think a lot of it's that like I don't play video games, right? I don't have a girlfriend. I don't really have any big relationships. It's me and the work, and I'm happy.
Are you so have you been kind of identified as like a publicly as a, I mean, it sounds like you have if you're working with, Newsmax, but like a domain expert in this area. And what does your like followership look like? So, as I've said, I've seen you a few different places, so you must have a pretty big follower trail across channels.
So I have over 1 million subscribers on YouTube. Instagram, I don't know, maybe about 40,000. I think Twitter is maybe 60,000. I don't really look at Instagram and Twitter all that much. I post there, but I don't really look at them much. Substack, which thank God for Substack, because YouTube demonetizes a lot of my stuff. And Substack is really the only place, Ryan McBeth.substack.com is really the only place that I can post stuff where I know it'll get demonetized. So I have about 127,000 fans there, I believe. And I have, what I do have a lot of fans in? I have a lot of fans in Congress and a lot of fans in the military who watch my videos. And sometimes they even use them as training tools. That's one of the reasons for some of my videos I say, hey, if you're in the military, send me a note. If you want to use this video as a training tool, I'll get you the MP4 that way you can have it on your laptop and play it for people instead of trying to deal with whatever internet connection you're dealing with in the orderly room, right? Because I want, at the end of the day, I want soldier for life, right? And I want soldiers to be better soldiers. And if I can give them some hints and some tips and allow them to think about the world in a different way, and that equates to survivability and professional development, yeah, I'm willing to do that. That's why I travel around to so many of these posts. I don't get paid for that. When I get paid speaking to civilians. The Army is like, we can copy or we can pick you up from the airport, right? It's like that. An honorarium is like, well, we'll buy you lunch, we'll pick you up from the airport.
Interested in your videos, your newsletters, or having you speak outside of the Army? Like what type of person is wanting this information generally?
A lot of it is just there's basically 3 groups of people. You have people who are currently serving, and you have veterans who are just kind of interested in military topics in general. And then there's this other group of people who didn't serve but are just kind of curious about the world and who want to be informed, or people who have this kind of obsession with how things work. Like one of the most popular videos I've done was a video on how artillery works. And I tracked an M777, explained every position on the gun, what they're doing, their fire commands, how the fire direction center works and sends a message to the gun line, what the gun line is doing every single step of the way. I did another video on how flyovers work. Like, how do they actually coordinate the flyover? Not just that. I mean, it goes back 6 months.
Right.
Where they receive the request, they allocate the fuel. They have to do mid-air refueling resources. They have to plan the route. They have to coordinate with TRACON because, hey, you look at a place like Baltimore, there's buildings on the right, BWI Airport on the left. You got this narrow corridor to fly down. Hey, that allows us to simulate flying down a pulse domain operations corridor, where we've just blown that corridor out, and we are going to put effects on target down this one narrow corridor. That's what a flyover is. A flyover is practicing time on target, getting bombs onto a target. The bomb just happens to be a stadium full of...
I got to do one of the originally with the Maryland National Guard over a Ravens game because I was the PAO at the time, so I was involved in.
Helicopter?
It's pretty cool. It was a whole fleet of I guess it was Blackhawks, and I got my watching video outside the door. It's actually a pretty cool video.
I did two. I did one with the A-10s. I wasn't in the A-10. I don't have two-seater A-10s. At least I don't think they do. And I did one in helicopters. Really, the footage from the A-10s is enough. Like, that's all people really want to see. You know, like, hey, yeah, you shot a picture of an A-10, your viewership goes up. Okay, well, this should be.
Are we getting rid of A-10s or not? I'm always hearing like we're about to get rid of them, and then
We are. Well, they're slowly going out of the inventory. Maryland National Guard, they're going to lose their A-10s in another year, I believe, which kind of stinks because they don't have a follow-on mission. So all those pilots are either going to retire or go to other units. There has been talk that Maryland might get another fighter unit, like the F-35, but then they have to build a lot of infrastructure.
Yeah.
Right. So they could get F-16s, like maybe move some F-16s from the Washington, D.C. National Guard, which I believe is at Andrews, and move them over to Martin State Airport. They might be able to do that, but then like what does DC do? So they should get something ideally, because there are some people who are saying that the Air Force for the Maryland Air National Guard should be all cyber.
Yeah, it seems.
And we need cyber, but Maryland, when half of their wing was lost, I guess when we cut the the C-27, it was like the little. I think they had C-27. It was like it looked like a C-130 with only two propellers. I think it was like a C-1 Sherpa or something, C-27 Sherpa. They had that, and that went away. The Air Force divested themselves of the inventory. But, I did a whole video on the A-10. It's a great aircraft for coin. It's a great aircraft for counterinsurgency. But I'll tell you something. Does it accelerate change? That's the question. Does it accelerate change? And if the answer is no, if this aircraft isn't survivable in a LSCO or large-scale combat operations environment, okay, maybe we can keep a couple around in the National Guard, but would that money be better spent equipping everybody with F-35s? Hey, if Ryan McBeth could wave a magic wand, if Ryan McBeth was picked as the Secretary of Defense, first thing I would do is allow marijuana. The second thing I would do is I would allow beards. And the third thing I would do is say, okay, we're getting rid of every single airframe except the F-35 and the F-15EX. Whew, gone. Now, all right, maybe we keep the Raptors around because they're kind of useful.
What a helicopter.
But imagine how much money we save. We get everybody on the same airframe, and the F-35 acts as the stealthy component. The F-15EX acts as the bomb truck. Everything else goes away.
So is the F-35, like I heard a lot about it. So it's a good aircraft. We're happy with how it turned out. We don't feel like it was a pretty big, wasteful boondoggle.
It's probably the most advanced. It's a flying supercomputer. And there was a couple of months ago, there was an exercise where I want to say it was an Air Force F-35 actually like fired an SM-2 missile from a Navy Aegis destroyer. So they're using Link 16. I forget the darn name of the language they talk in. But the F-35 saw the target and told the destroyer, okay, I need you to fire a missile. So it's this absolutely amazing airframe that doesn't really focus on weapons. I haven't equated to a quarterback, right? Where the name of the darn Ravens quarterback flew out of my head, and he's the most amazing freaking quarterback. It's like the F-35 was like a quarterback. And, the quarterback calls the plays, right, and coordinates with the receivers and throws the ball to whoever's open. But the quarterback can also run with the ball. So the F-35 might coordinate with other units saying, like, hey, you go after this target, you go after that target. And then if the F-35 needs to shoot, the F-35 can shoot. And that's just not a capability that any Air Force has anywhere.
Well, and the point was
command and control plane that is unarmed.
It's joint, right? So didn't we sell a bunch of our partners, and don't the Chinese already have their like copycat version of it to some extent?
Yeah, I mean, so we really don't know how well I'm sure there's some Air Force radar operators, Navy radar operators who might be laughing right now, right? Because they designed whatever wrong. You might be able to get the shape wrong, but the paint isn't the same, or maybe underneath it's aluminum. There's a lot that China does, where it looks like a copy, but it's not exactly the same on the inside, and it's the inside that counts. So you might have something that looks like the F-35, but if it doesn't have the computational power, I mean, that's the key, right? That's the key to the F-35. It's computational power. So, yeah, that China might have a copy, but isn't really a copy.
What's the cost for one of those things?
It varies, I believe, between 80 million and 120 million. I'm doing this off the top of my head. But, if you order 4 per year, it might be
Discount
120 million. If you order 20 per year, all right, we'll knock it down to 75 million, right? Like, what can we do to keep the production level?
more is that than like an F-22 or something? What are those, like 20 or 30?
Well, the F-22 isn't produced anymore, so I don't know. I can't give you the answers off the top of my head. But I would probably say it's about 3 times as much as your standard Gen 4.5 fighter. But you're getting more capability. Twice as much as your standard Gen 4.5 fighter. But you're getting this incredible leap in processing ability to coordinate across multiple domains.
Is it public how many of them we have?
Yeah, I think so. I think we have about 2,000.
Oh.
I mean, that were built. Yeah, 2,000 that were built for all 19 partners in the F-22 program or the F-35 program.
I always wonder. All right, so I don't know how long it took to like get the F-35 complete and done.
What?
But are they already working on like the?
I remember exactly the first except the read. I believe the first one was the Marine Corps versions. That was the B version, and they needed that first because the Marine Corps, the Harriers were getting old, right? Harriers were getting old. They needed something to replace that thing. So yeah, the B version was first. I want to say that started being fielded in the early 2010s. 2011, 2012, but don't quote me on that. I don't remember. See, this is the bad part about doing podcasts. You don't know what you're talking about because actually,
none of these your questions. You just like curious.
Going off with this F-35 tangent. Like I mean, one of the so I guess that's like the difference between me and Peter Zion, right? If I don't know the answer, I say like, I don't know, dude. I was make up something that sounds good, right?
As it should be, man. As it should be. So I'm wondering, actually, how did you go? So I think you started out as an artillery guy, right, in the Army?
No, I was anti-armor. I was 11. My contract said 11 Hotel, and then they said, poof, everybody's 11 Bravo now. Oh, and by the way, since you know toes, you're carrying the Dragon. It's this freaking heavy SAG missile that came before the Javelin. So I ended up doing of course you're in the weapons squad, right? And I liked it. I liked weapons squad. And I like being in the weapons company when they made the infantry brigade combat teams. And number one, I don't like walking. Like I roll now. You see the infantry guys out there walking, and you're sitting in your gun truck, you're smoking, you have a barbecue that you just put away. I have coffee because I have a little camping stove. It's a nice life. Now the disadvantage, you get back to the motor pool.
Yeah.
And guess what? Like the 11 Bravos, they clean their weapon, turn it in, they're down at the club dancing, right? You're in Delt's company. What are you doing? You're turning those vehicles in until 10 o'clock at night, right? Till 2200. So you have so much more equipment to an absurd degree, and you're cleaning everything.
Hell, looks scared.
It's Monday. It's time to do a layout. We're missing the VX3 pin for the Mark 19 that makes sure the Mark 19 doesn't explode when you fire. We got to find that pin every Monday. We're doing a layout. So that's kind of the disadvantage.
Well, how did you get from, being basically a ground pounder going to what ultimately you get into, which is the space of
software?
What do you call it? Intelligence, I suppose.
So, when I graduated from high school, my father wanted me to be a carpenter. Learn a trade, because if you learn a trade, then you'll be set for life, right? And so, I did carpentry. And I am a fair framing carpenter. I am okay at it. I can don't ask me to build a cabinet. But you want me to frame a building? I can frame a building. I can do some carpentry work. When I was in high school, I really got into the computer club there, which I know sounds geeky. But like back then, like computer club wasn't like playing video games. Computer club was like you had access to a computer and you could write software. I liked it. I was good at it. And I wanted to be a software engineer. And you know, you say that to your dad who worked in a warehouse all his life. And like to him, you say computer and it's the green terminal that you're, you know, typing into to see if something's in stock. Like that's what computer means to him, right?
You said no son of mine is going to work with computers. You're going to be a carpenter.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to be a carpenter, right? So, you know, I joined for the college money, right? You join to serve your country, but really 90% of everybody joins the college money.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. And so I joined for the college money, and while I was in, I got my bachelor's degree in computer science, and that kind of sucked. Like you're friggin' out on mission, and you come home and you clean your, you know, you get back to Liberty, get back to Fob Liberty, and you clean your weapons, and like everybody else racks out, and I have to open my laptop to do coursework. Right? It took me 8 years to get my first degree.
Wow.
And then I think 5 years to get my master's in engineering management. But I wanted to be a software engineer. It just took me 20 some years to do it. But I'm debt free, right? And when I got out, you know, there was this company, it's called Accenture. I have a security clearance. I'm also an infantryman, and they were doing some software that helps find and kill bad guys. And, you know, one thing I could give them that a lot of other soldiers didn't have, or a lot of other software engineers didn't have, was perspective. Like, hey, the icons on this screen need to be bigger because we're going to be wearing gloves. What if we're wearing CBRN suits, right? So if we're wearing CBRN suits, we're not going to be able to see this icon, so we need to make the icons bigger. Like, I know that stuff. There was one thing where we had these sensors that you had placed around the fob. It's 4 sensors. It's called UCAM sensors. And the engineers said, like, all right, well, if one sensor goes down, we're going to throw a yellow icon. I'm like, oh, no, because if one sensor goes down, it means an area isn't covered. That's redder than red. We got to post a guard there, right? But only I would know that. Well, any infantry man who's also a software engineer would know that. But there's not a lot of us. So, yeah, I did a lot of stuff like that. And that really worked out pretty darn well for me, so that I was really happy at Accenture. It was a great company. I learned so much. And that's kind of how I got onto the software end. It was just, I wanted to be a software engineer. I just wasn't sure how or with whom. And Accenture rolled in, and they appreciated veterans. And I was happy to work for them.
I will say, you know, part of what I do, my nonprofit, Friendly Forces, it basically identifies companies that are, you know, very enabling of military reservists. And I know Accenture is one. Back, I've been in some chats with them, but they're up there as like a company that definitely appreciates veterans. And my particular thing is, it's great that you hired veterans. What about people in your workforce who may be still deploying, training, doing military stuff? And they're good for that. So happy to plug them there. So you were at Accenture for a few years, and then you moved into some different stuff. Now you're working with, well, I guess multiple organizations.
Yeah, right.
Velocity and Aeromed Lab.
Yeah. Velocity is it's a private intelligence company, or a contract organization, and I do occasional stuff for them. You know, initially I thought, I'm like, oh, I'll give a speech, I'll do whatever. And it kind of turned into more than that. And some of which is stuff like monitoring. Let's say there's a Navy exercise going on. The Navy might contract with Velocity to inspect, like look at all the online traffic that's going on. Are people saying that, hey, look, the U.S. Marine Corps is about to invade Chile? You know, are people spreading misinformation about what we're doing in this military exercise? And there's other things that Velocity does. It's an e-company.
Question about what type of people? So I actually did some work in a similar vein to that on a contract. More or less, I felt like the government wasn't really interested in listening to us. But the people we had on our team tended to be, you know, former PSYOP, IO, I had a CA, public affairs background, people like that. And we were smart, had some interesting experience, you know, knew what we were doing. But I couldn't help but think that if we're doing this, some of the best possible people that could do this job would be like a 14-year-old girl who is an expert in all things. So, I mean, there's memes about it, them being like FBI agents. knowing how to cross-reference and triangulate all the little social media things to like identify who your ex's ex was. You think
Yeah, and I have said this multiple times that we need something similar to the Navy's Viper teams. The Navy has these teams that it sounds a lot cooler though, actually. These Viper teams, they it means like visual information personnel.
Yeah.
They basically, whenever we're transiting the Strait of Taiwan and China decides to act a fool by trying to ram us and then cutting away at the last moment, we have these Viper teams on these ships that record everything. So you already identify that you need to be proactive, right? Why don't you identify that, like, all right, we need to have what I call offensive PAOs. And an offensive PAO should be a combat arms guy, who's the combat arms background, who has the training and background to understand various weapon systems and is empowered to actually reach out to creators and say, hey, this incident just happened. Here's the actual footage. I can't tell you what to say, but here's what really happened. It's up to you as to whether or not you can do that. Mm-hmm. And when there was an incident in North Carolina after the Hurricane Helene, where I got calls from not the National Guard PAO, but I got calls from the North Carolina guys who were in the North Carolina National Guard who called me like, Ryan, people are spreading lies online about what we're doing here. And I'm like, I can't help you. I can't talk about this because the military can't tell me what to say. And I'm like, right now, I'm not the PAO. I'm just Joe Snuffy Private. And I'm tired of these militia guys trying to stop us from doing our jobs.
Was that real?
Oh yeah. One big issue was that, Jesus, North Carolina was such a cluster, and a lot of it, we did it to ourselves. Russia didn't even do anything.
Right.
We did it to ourselves. We basically said that the National Guard isn't helping people. FEMA isn't helping people.
Right.
Don't coordinate with the National Guard. Just load up your truck and go in to North Carolina. There were incidents like, the National Guard would say to people, no, you can't come down this road. It's washed out. You'll die. There's no road beyond this curve. And then it becomes the National Guard isn't letting people in back. Martial law. There were people who just rented helicopters in droves and just freaking flew in themselves. And Jesus Christ, it's lucky that there wasn't a mid-air collision. So, because
I was just discussing this, and there's a name for this phenomenon. I forget what it's called, but it's when you have physically been there for an event. So you know exactly what happened, but then you see how the media reports on it. And I don't think it's malicious, but even if they get the facts right, they miss like super important context of what actually happened. And seeing that delta between I was there, I know what happened, and seeing like what gets picked up as the narrative, it's really interesting. And again, that's that whole information, environment thing.
Well, there was another issue with the Guard, not the Guard, it was FEMA. And this is kind of on FEMA. So that, yeah, if you would say you're working for FEMA, but you're from San Francisco, you didn't grow up around guns. I didn't grow up around guns. First time I ever fired a gun was when I joined the Army, right? And you're some person who grew up in San Francisco or New York, the people who live in the Western foothills of North Carolina are some hard men. And they carry around pistols on their hip. And so they go to the FEMA aid tent and they're carrying a pistol. And the FEMA guy says, get the hell out of here with that gun. FEMA's not giving out aid.
Right.
Right? FEMA told me to leave. They're kind of omitting the fact that you're carrying an AR-15. But that's what they do. You have to adjust the culture.
There was one sort of semi-incident that you've now turned into, oh, this is happening. Like, it's not happening. Like, one guy somewhere this happened, and that was pretty much it. But it's not a trend. That's the expectation.
And that kind of, and so there's people who want to score political points and dunk on the libs for mishandling. And I'm sure there was stuff that was mishandled, but like they'll take. There was a thing where a helicopter was trying to land at this one, and basically these people didn't know how to set up an LZ, and the stuff was way too close. And when the helicopter saw that supplies were getting blown all over the place, they just left. And that turned into the National Guard used rotor wash to damage the flies because they don't keep it.
Yeah, which was the most ridiculous. Like, yeah, that made no sense whatsoever. And there was all these conspiracy theories about it not being like a guard helicopter and all this sorts of.
Oh yeah, there's no markings. This is all black.
Yeah, that was probably some pilot going on like 1 hour of sleep in the last 24 hours, trying to do his job. He was told to go fly some. Actually, so on that point, I definitely want to get into Aero Med Lab and what you guys
Okay.
here. So it sounds pretty cool. Give me like the elevator pitch for what.
Okay, so Aeromed elevator pitch. Aeromed Lab delivers whole blood through AI-powered drones. Essentially, a couple of years back, I read a paper by this bigger score. I was in Austin, and this guy Cody Hatfield, who was the founder of Aeromed Lab, he called me. He's in Dallas. He said, "Hey, Ryan, I heard you're in Austin delivering a speech. I work for the University of Texas at Dallas. I run the Drone Combat Lab here." Drone Combat Lab, Jesus. And would you be willing to come up, take a look at what I'm doing? And I said, yeah, you know what? Southwest Airlines, $99. Yeah, I'll go. I'll come up. I have hotel points. I have Southwest points. I'll go. So I flew up. I met the guy. And there was an honest-to-God drone combat lab at the University of Texas at Dallas. And I said to him, like, how are the blue-haired idiots not protesting outside your door right now? Dallas is killing children in Gaza with their drones, right? And I said to him, like, look, ain't nobody, as soon as someone realizes that you have something called the Drone Combat Lab at your university, you will have protesters lined up outside the door.
Right.
You need to change this to something for humanitarian purposes. And I told him, like, look, I read a paper by Aaron Epstein, is this emergency doctor. He created the Global Surgical Medical Support Group. And he wrote this landmark paper about how, like, in the future, we're not going to have medevac. People are just going to believe death.
Yeah, the golden hour, they say.
The golden hour is done.
Yeah.
There is no more golden hour. You just die. And 80% of all soldiers die from hemorrhagic shock. I think it was 86%, actually. And I was like, the biggest bang for the buck here is we need to get whole blood to the soldier and then drop that blood off. And we need to keep those soldiers alive for 36 hours until the next log pack comes. Because every 36 hours, you get a log pack, right? So log pack comes in, drop off the stuff. Soldiers go back. Wounded go back on the log pack as Kazabak, right? So we need to figure out how to do that. And we have to use drones because helicopters aren't getting in. Helicopters will get shot down. These drones have to use some sort of inertial guidance because you can't use GPS because GPS will be degraded.
Right.
So we need to figure out how to do this. And there was AI software that Cody had written to do like kind of drone dogfighting kind of thing. And it's like, we can do that. If we can use the AI to do drone dogfighting, we can use the AI to not only navigate to the casualty, but then find a VS-17 panel someone threw out a window and drop the blood directly into that room. So that way the medic doesn't have to leave the room and expose themselves to enemy fire. So I worked for that company. I thought it would be like, 2 hours here, 2 hours there. I'm working 35 hours a week for this company. It's out. We just booked. We did some testing in Portales, New Mexico, Orlando Cannon Air Force Base. We did some testing there in June, I think it was, and that was good because we learned a lot. We learned how robust our system was. Then we just bought a new test facility in Texas, Nevada. They call it Nevada. It's spelled Nevada, but they call it Nevada. We did some flight testing in Nevada, Texas. We bought or leased a site there. I just got back from Texas where we furnished it. Like, I had to build these cubicles and stuff. Like 3 degrees and I'm building cubicles, but that's startup life.
Jan's dirty. So have you, there must be obvious humanitarian aid use cases for what you're doing, I would think.
Yeah. It can deliver blood. We're actually doing we have a mission set with the Special Forces, like a training mission, test mission in March, where we're going to deliver vaccines. Because, the Special Forces, they go into a village, you're like, hey, your goat's sick. Would you like a vaccine? Hearts and minds. But they can't carry the vaccine with them because they don't know what village is going to need what. But, hey, call Aeromed Lab. Drone comes along, drops the vaccine. They vaccinate the goat, hearts and minds. We win the war.
Well, now, wait a minute. So if I'm in the middle of, I don't know, Sudan. Where is this drone being launched from? Like,
the drone would be launched from ideally the field support hospital.
Okay, so they would have a number of these drones.
We would have a truck with 4 drones by each field hospital. We might be able to push down to Charlie Medical. We might be able to push down to the battalion aid station, maybe. Although he's not a real surgeon. That battalion surgeon name is really just battalion surgeon is really like leftover from the Civil War, right? They might as well call him barber surgeon,
right?
Because they might not necessarily be a surgeon. It's just any old doctor. Here you go. Make sure the medics aren't killing people. We might be able to put a drone truck by battalion. But really, like, there's a lot of use cases for things like NTC. I think we lose like 1.3 people per cycle at NTC right now.
Just from heat cats and stuff?
We can deliver lactate ringers, right? If you don't have it on you right now, we got you. We got blood in case there's a mass casualty event. So I think that supporting JRTC, supporting NTC, supporting Hohnsfelds, that's a big opportunity for us. And we're almost there. We have a WeFunder right now where I actually can't advertise for that now that I think of it. But so yeah, we do a WeFunder, although I can't ask people to go to it. But we've crowdfunded. We've had some investor money. We've crowdfunded almost $350,000 just through crowdfunding, which will convert to equity. So like people believe in the product, and we're hiring. Like we're grumbling, and we need. I think this is something the Army needs, and I think it's really going to be a factor in keeping soldiers alive in the future.
So answer me this: we all know next, LISCO war, electronic warfare. You kind of touched on it. Like, how are we hardening like our drones from just being knocked out of the sky with EMP type stuff and whatever it may be?
Well, that's a big question, right? Like you can't necessarily harden something like a drone for EMP. What we have to worry about is someone sending shutdown codes. Anything with a transmitter on it can be targeted. If you can be targeted, you can be killed. And that kill could be a kinetic kill or it could be an electronic warfare kill. And one of the things that I actually foresee is the end of drones. And people look at me and they go, oh my God, the end of drones. We can't assume that Ukraine is going to look like the next war is going to look like Ukraine.
Right.
And the only reason Ukraine is using FPV drones is because we didn't give them enough artillery shells. And you need to kill by the bushel, not in onesies and twosies.
Right.
So the only reason they're killing in onesies and twosies is that that's all they got. But I don't envision an American soldier putting a loitering munition on it or putting a drone drop munition on a drone and having that thing take off and go. We take out the whole freaking grid square.
Right.
So a drone would be more effective as a spotter for something like HIMARS than it would to kill in onesies and twosies, and then attrit that drone, right, where you can't use it again. So what I kind of envision is a future where drones are used less on the battlefield, but used more judiciously, especially since drone countermeasures are going to be a lot bigger. Things like MSHORAD, lasers that can shoot these drones down. So any kind of drone needs to fly low and fast, and maybe be AI powered because it's the only way to survive. Because as soon as you open up that radio link, you can be targeted. In fact, our drone has no GPS and no radio.
Sorry, my screen paused there.
That's okay. I have about 1 minute left before I got to go to my next.
Are the Chinese ahead of us in drones? Like, what's
Yes, without a doubt.
What's that possible?
Without a doubt, they are ahead of us. Not only ahead of us in tech, but ahead of us in manufacturing. China can put out more drones than we can field just because they have that manufacturing capability for the civilian.
Are their drones better, though? Or are they piece of shit?
Quantity has a quality of its own.
That's true.
So it doesn't matter if the Chinese drone is as good if they have 20 of them.
Right. And that's what the kill chain, which I'm sure you've read, goes in all that kind of stuff. But I want to be respectful of your time. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on, man. Would love to have you on again just to just fire all sorts of random questions at you. But really appreciate you coming on, man. Thank you for your service. You're doing really cool stuff. And we'll make sure to tag all this stuff when this goes live, man.
Thank you so much, Eric. It's been great.
All right, dude. We'll talk soon. And to the audience, stay part-timing.